Welcome to the Mystic and the Skeptic. In this week's show, we have special guests to discuss their project. They started to do cosplay with children and people who need support. For people who are not familiar with cosplay, is the dressing up, but it's not just dressing up like you do for a party. Like, it's going all out. The reason that I even found out about these guys is because my neighbor has $1,000 Captain American costume. And some people would say, well, that's a lot of money to spend on a costume. But if you want to do it, you're going to do it right. So I wish I had the permission to spend $1,000 on a costume. But I'm very proud to have met Greg Illich, who does that kind of work.
Sure. So hi, my name is Abigail Murillo. I am one of the co-founders of Cosplay for Kids.
Yes, and my name is Justin Bowyer. I am the volunteer coordinator for Cosplay for Kids.
When people think of cosplay, you think about Comic-Con or other type of conferences where people dress up and it's a fun thing. How do you, when someone asks you, you're an adult and you dress up as superheroes and run around, how do you guys respond or explain what you do for fun?
So it begins by kind of actually, I guess, feeding it a little bit. So yes, we do dress up as characters from comic books, movies, cartoon shows.
And it is a lot of fun.
It is very much a lot of fun. It's how we kind of started, actually, was we all had this love for dressing up as character, but it's also artistic. Before we get into the charity side of it, is an artistic thing. We build our own costumes and we style our own wigs and we form our own little cliques and stuff to go out and enjoy this. It's a great hobby to begin with, and now that we've had the opportunity, it's a great way to perform a charitable act. So it comes down to say, yes, we do dress up as superheroes, but we make a huge difference in the lives of the children that we interact with at all of our events and projects.
Abigail, were you the one that came up with the idea, or how did this come about?
So it actually started with a Facebook page it's a HTX anime. So it did start, like you were saying, with people who just genuinely enjoy dressing up as characters that they love. And we started a forum asking if anyone would be interested in sharing their gifts with us, but for charity. And that's really how it all started, with just a group of nerds that came together on the post to begin a charity group. And we made it a focus to interact with children who were ill and who may never get an opportunity to just really be a child. When we have these events, it's kind of our way of breaking the routine of procedures, medication, and just bring little moments of joy. And that's how we kind of began our group's mission.
So we've had on the show a friend of mine who gives out comic books to kids at Ronald McDonald House, and he takes them to the comic book stores to forget about being sick. Houston is like the capital of medical support for people throughout the world. So we're very fortunate to have that. But how do you break in to do this type of charitable work? Isn't it a lot of red tape to get into a hospital with all the things about security and volunteering and all that?
Mm-hmm. It definitely was a challenge, especially starting out. That was one of the biggest hurdles, I think, was just getting that first event. A lot of paperwork, definitely. Our first was Texas Children's Hospital. We had to do background checks, make sure all our vaccinations were on record, and just kind of a waiting game to wait and see all of our paperwork processed. And we got, I feel like, a little bit of luck that we were trusted, that being our first event. And we were able to have the first event with Texas Children's Hospital. I believe it was in July of 2014. And after that, I will say, once you start one event, I feel like it's a little bit easier once you start building kind of that reputation. Later on, I did also start the organization at my former university, at the University of Houston downtown. And so once we became an official org with that university, we were able to pull in more kind of building a network from that as well.
Very cool. And I'm seeing that you guys were featured on the University of Houston downtown's website, on the Houston Press. And have you been to those conferences where everybody dresses up and they talk about comic books, like Comic Palooza or
conferences? Do you mean? We've been to Comic Palooza and
Onicon. We've been to quite a few conventions and all that include all the dress up, and there's a big focus on both anime and superheroes. It's actually quite a scene, actually seeing everybody together. You'll have a group of people that are all dressed up maybe with a specific theme. And then you'll even have just families that come off the streets even. They just see a bunch of people dressed up walking into a building, and they'll say, well, let's go check this out. We've been to plenty of them, and that is kind of like a place where as we do go through when we are having our fun, we do also have the opportunity to kind of with people that come around to us. We have taken the opportunity to reach out a little bit in those communities.
Fantastic. So, and you said this has been going on since July?
What's kind of the starting date?
We're going on about 4.5 years now.
Yep, and it's been a long road of kind of finding the right members for us. And honestly, now with all the time that we spent, we have a very amazing core team, and with that, we also have a very strong standard that we like to hold our heroes up to who want to join us. Yeah,
learned a lot too throughout the years, just even on how to build an organization. Definitely UHD helped us a lot in that. That magazine that we were published in was part of the Community Engagement and Service Learning Grant. We applied for that grant and were awarded $2,000 to fund our services. So a lot of on budgeting it as well and making sure that we kind of proved our point of why we were using these items and their purpose for it.
And just really our impact that we were going to have. So hence why we deserve to have this money, not for us, but as like a company that will inevitably better the lives of the children or just really the entire population that surrounds us here in Houston, Texas.
Tell me about what you guys learned. Is it a nonprofit or is it still just a small organization up to this point?
It's still a small organization up to this point, the only affiliation being UHD.
So, and we worked solely off of either our in-house money that we kind of pulled together as a group, or off of the donations and grants that we've received through programs and fundraising. We are looking to become an official nonprofit. That's down the road in the works. We've already got some stuff in our documentation. We're building for the building of our organization. A mentor that actually Abigail had the opportunity of finding for us.
Yes,
it was a great
also
help.
A professor from UHD. We found a lot of resources definitely from that university.
So tell me, what makes a Cosplay for Kids member unique? We're in a world now that is saturated with groups. If you go on Meetup, there's like every group under the sun that does all kinds of different things. What makes your members unique? What makes them to be trusted with this this opportunity to help people in need? And what have you learned throughout the years with having different people come through?
So to just hit kind of like the nitty-gritty point of this is, like I stated prior, we've been doing this for a few years now, and because of all the time we've spent, we had to kind of tighten our rankings a bit. So we have had people that have come through that we didn't wish to actually continue being a part of our group, and that's just because they didn't come prepared to give their time and the effort into what our group needs.
And it might sound harsh, but the population that we serve kind of also deserves to have the very best volunteers available. So we do utilize our different stages of interviewing to determine that we have the appropriate member for the group and who meets that mission. And I think that's what makes them a very unique individual for our group. They definitely match our mission. They're not just focused on the cosplay aspect of it, but they have this genuine want for charity work and to work with children, that have the ability to work with children with disabilities, with different illnesses, with low socioeconomic status, just different families at risk.
And it really comes down to there's a camaraderie that is formed when we do this, and that's really the biggest tell. It's like Abigail stated, we want people that aren't in it just for the dress up, to take photos and to kind of laugh and goof off. We do have those days, and those are, I feel, really a necessity to create these team building and the bonds that we have. But really what we look for that makes our heroes unique is, one, the ability for us to look out for one another. Our group is very tight-knit. We talk about our day-to-day lives with each other. When one member is suffering, we all suffer alongside with them. We help each other through it. There's that connection that we form just in member-to-member basis. If you can't start with that, if you can't have that in-house love and care for one another, how are you going to take that out into the world and try to offer comfort to a child who's in great need? If you need that to begin, so I would say that's probably the first point.
Yeah, another Another point would be that our group members are definitely very resilient. The work that we do can be definitely a lot of fun. I mean, cosplaying is a very fun thing to do, but it can also be very difficult emotionally. Some of the children or individuals that we see can be very ill or be going through really difficult situations. You may see a bruise or something like that, and that can be very hard on you. And so we do definitely need individuals that can kind of put our own emotions aside and focus on the child or that person who we are with at that time and make sure that we can help them at that moment, that it's not about us. And I feel like that's what makes our group very special, in my opinion.
And to kind of, I guess, hit another note you brought up about there's so many groups out there, and that kind of leads me to another point. It's consistency and accountability that our members have.
Responsibility.
When we set up an event, the people that are coordinating with us, they go out and they tell the children or the population that's going to be at these, Superman's going to be here, Batman's going to be here, Wonder Woman's going to be here, and you get this, you build this hype for, all these superheroes that I love and care for are going to be here. I can't wait to see whichever superhero is my favorite. And then if you turn around and then just say, I had a prior engagement, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to break it off. Well, it's not member A didn't make it today. It's Superman didn't make it today. All right, it's Spider-Man didn't make it today. And so that is another huge, unique aspect for our group is, all these other small groups, people can jump around back and forth, but there's no requirement to be there day in and day out. With our group, there's a requirement that you are there when needed. Mm-hmm. And that is something that we hold true to, and that is, I think, a pretty defining feature for us.
When I was a teacher of kids in elementary school, I did a project where we all dressed up as superheroes, and the first thing the kids want to do is fight each other. And I said, no, we're going to do a peaceful resolution of conflict. And it was like they didn't know what to do, because I thought about, do comic books, do superhero movies, do they promote violence, or can they be a form of teaching people how to resolve issues in a diplomatic way? And growing up with Superman and things like that, it wasn't violent. There was conflict and maybe there was punching, but it wasn't what you see now. Like when I play superhero girls or anything like that for my daughters, they're always like very aggressive and like jumping up and down, and like it seems like it's changed. Has any parent ever brought up to you guys that maybe superheroes are now portrayed as very physical and not dealing with conflict in a better way than just hurting each other? Or have you guys ever thought about that? Okay,
so now that would be a little bit of I guess, two-sided topic to bring up. So you have your split between your new age films that you have out now, and versus maybe the more child-friendly cartoons that are out there. So we can talk about something that's probably very controversial currently right now, and that would be the Joker film. That was a movie that was about the superhero universe, but it was a very violent movie, and that was a focus on mental illness. So there was the focus of that movie was, an answer to what's wrong with society. Somebody search for it, like how can he get better? You look at some of these other films that they have out, you have Batman versus Superman, you have the Avengers films, all these movies come together. Yes, they're very violent, and in a lot of them, violence is kind of the final portrayal in those movies. Those are more, though, tailored to, honestly, at this point, to the adult genre. Most of these superhero movies are coming out PG-13 and rated R now. I mean, you look at Wolverine, that was an incredibly violent movie. But those movies are not really, those movies aren't meant for children. You can have kids that of an age that will come in and can actually find the enjoyment and see that it's not, I guess, a moral lesson, obviously, in some of these. It's just a movie being a movie.
I think it can definitely bring up the topic of violence. Like if a child will bring up something violent to us, I think you can view, it depends on the person, you can view it as in a negative perspective, saying, oh, it's teaching this child violence. But I think you can also view it as it's an opportunity for you to teach that child how to resolve that, or another way to view that. It really depends on the person.
And that's true. That's these situations are a gateway to life, and it allows a conversation between a child and their guardian to talk a little bit about what, I guess, the purpose of the actions in these movies and shows are. But then if you look at the flip side, you can look at the TV series Supergirl. That show does focus on the violent conflict, but there's always this reinforcement of we don't want to hurt. We never want to kill. That's never the answer. We never really want to hurt. If we can end this situation non-violently, that's always the approach that Supergirl wants to take throughout the whole show. And in the cartoon, you do see a balance of characters that take the aggressive approach versus people who take the pacifist approach. That is kind of the line that I guess is kind of teetering back and forth now. There's more sensationalism in TV shows now. We want something flashy. So what's flashy? Fight scenes. And that's true. A lot of that is being portrayed more and more in our media, especially in the superhero genre, as that's an easy way to focus on it. But to say that the whole entire, I guess, genre of superheroes being entirely focused on violence isn't necessarily true. You have both the violence aspect, which is supposed to be the fun, flashy side of cinematography.
More geared towards adults.
Yeah, towards the adult side. And then you have these more child-friendly programs, and they do focus on, there's always a better way to resolve things. Can we talk this out? Can we bring peace?
Hope.
Exactly. There's hope. There's peace. There's everybody being considered equal in these shows. That is an approach there, and it really just depends on which piece of media you're looking at that specific time.
And what is it about superheroes that gives kids with disabilities or illnesses hope from what you've seen?
So, would you like to take the first part, or do you want me to take it?
So, for me specifically, I feel that for women and girls, there's a lot of minority women in our specific. I am Latina. Wonder Woman is Latina. Our Deadpool is Vietnamese. So I feel like we have a good representation of minorities in our specific group, and it's really nice to see the children kind of identify themselves as a superhero when they can see that they look like one of us. I think it's also kind of reflected in the rise of female representatives in superhero movies, and as well as in our group. We have a female Captain America as well, that is side by side to Greg Illich. Her name is Denise Reynoso. She is kind of just taking that lead role in a female version. We also have a female Spider-Woman. And so I feel that it really does bring about hope for minorities specifically. I just think our group is so diverse, which is one of our best qualities, and it lets us reach many children. Heroes are always empowering children, and they'll take a pose with us, and you can see even when they're taking a pose, if it's a child or individual who's kind of slouched over and they're not feeling good, and when we're like, let's do that superhero pose, they'll perch up, they'll put their muscle up, they'll put their Spider-Man webbing up, and you can really see that kind of boost of confidence, and their faces light up.
So, that's the one thing that I'm really proud of about our group is that we are so diverse that it's just like Abby said, a child will look for a superhero, and then when they see a superhero that has the same skin color, that represents them on a physical scale, they connect quicker and stronger. And so you have these children who are in need of a moral boost. So if you have somebody that looks like you see it strong and powerful and able to protect and is very wise even, there's that incredible feeling they have that I have that in me. I have that potential to do what I want to do, be what I want to be. You talk to these kids, and it's crazy that, you go to Shriners Hospital, you go to the Ronald McDonald House, you'll see kids that just look down. You can see it in their face that they're tired, that they just are not, they don't have that look of, oh, I'm having fun, I'm a child, the world is infinite to me. They don't have that look in their face. And then when we step into that room, our mere presence, we are there with them. That gives them hope. That gives them something to smile at. And really, as much as it may not be a medical condition, happiness does boost those that are in these situations. So those that have disabilities, that are very ill, they feel that when they come in the room. It's like Abby said, we squat down to take a pose with them. We say, hey, give us your superhero pose, show us your muscles, let's see how strong you are. And those little kids will go from just kind of that sour look on their face, and then bam, those biceps are flexed out. They got that big grin on their face.
Yeah.
They're all from ear to ear. They're very happy. It doesn't matter what's going on right there in that moment in their life. They are a superhero alongside other superheroes, and that is something impossible to match. They see us as somebody that they can talk to about whatever's bothering them that day, or they just want to tell us, what color that dinosaur was that they saw in the playroom. They even tell us like, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a superhero, I want to be a chef. No detail's ever too small for us to hear. All right, and we're always there to listen, and it really drives those children another step forward.
It's interesting that when I was in college, when I first started, there was an ad in the paper somewhere that they needed people to dress up as characters to go to kids' parties. And I signed up, and I was Santa Claus, I was Spider-Man, I was Power Ranger, but it was just you show up, you didn't even have to do anything. The kids were so excited to see you. They all wanted to take pictures with you, and they wanted to play, hang out. So paint for us a picture of how your events go down. Like, do you go into the unit where the kids are at and you just hang out with them, or is there specific activities, or is it just being in a stage? How does it go depending on the event?
So I would say it really depends on the event we're doing. So for example, if it's at a hospital like Shriners or Texas Children's Hospital, then we will have coloring sheets, board games, really activities that can be done on the bedside, because a lot of times they have illnesses or disabilities that kind of don't allow movement. So we really try to tailor our activities based on the specific event. So we'll do our research prior to attending. So what we've done in the past is prepare superhero mask templates out of felt, try to do like a hypoallergenic material. We'll print off a lot of coloring sheets or have coloring books bought with our funding. What else do we have? Coloring, markers,
paper flowers, Captain America paper plate, shields. We try to tailor the crafts to something seasonal, or maybe something that is situationally pleasant for the children at that location. And as Abby had mentioned, we do try to tailor any of our crafts or activities to be something that is
suitable.
It's suitable for pretty much anybody to take a part of. Anybody, no matter what their disability is, so can sit down with us and interact with us with these crafts.
An example of kind of that, depending on the event of Yahweh, we had it's solely a shelter for women and children who are homeless, and so we tailored the craft activities so that the children could make something for their moms. Mm-hmm. So it was like paper flowers that they could gift to their moms. And for that specific event, we had a script that we wrote, a play that we performed that was a kind of a positive message through the superheroes. It was a lesson in forgiveness. And I recall, that we ended our play and we were engaging with the kids, and a couple of the kids were having an argument, and one of the volunteer coordinators said, remember, the lesson in forgiveness. And the little kids kind of put the toy that they were fighting down aside and gave each other a hug, and they were reminded of that lesson that we were trying to instill in them, and that was really rewarding. And
another thing kind of tailored to specific events. So when we have our events in like closed areas like that, that's what we tend to focus on. And then we have other events such as the Epilepsy Walk With Me, the Epilepsy Foundation's Walk With Me, the 5K, Alex's 5K, Easter Stills run. And what we're really there for is we're kind of the hype team. We're the ones that go stand at the starting line, and we're there for the countdown to get everybody hyped up and ready to go.
And medals as they're winning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they've even had us do an opening speech at one of the events for, I believe it was the Epilepsy Foundation. It was kind of to be a motivational speech as a superhero to, just kind of boost the morale of not only the children, but even the parents. The families of these populations tend to get just as much into the event as the children do. It's a time for them to have fun. It's a time for them to relax and just enjoy their surroundings. So our organization the events and project stuff that we have here really are tailored specifically for the event. So, if they want us to come out there, yell and scream and holler and welcome all the children and the families involved to whatever the event is, we're there.
Or during Christmas, if we're passing out gifts that were sponsored to the children, we're there for that too.
It really is specific to where we go. So,
no event will be the same, really. It's all. Even
if it's the same organization, every event's a little different where, what they have us doing. But I can say that it is no matter what we do, it's always rewarding to see the smile on the faces of every child and parent involved.
When I was a teacher of kids in elementary school, I did a project where we all dressed up as superheroes, and the first thing the kids want to do is fight each other. And I said, no, we're going to do a peaceful resolution of conflict. And it was like they didn't know what to do, because I thought about, do comic books, do superhero movies, do they promote violence, or can they be a form of teaching people how to resolve issues in a diplomatic way? And growing up with Superman and things like that, it wasn't violent. There was conflict and maybe there was punching, but it wasn't what you see now. Like when I play superhero girls or anything like that for my daughters, they're always like very aggressive and like jumping up and down, and like it seems like it's changed. Has any parent ever brought up to you guys that maybe superheroes are now portrayed as very physical and not dealing with conflict in a better way than just hurting each other? Or have you guys ever thought about that?
Okay, so now that would be a little bit of I guess, two-sided topic to bring up. So you have your split between your new age films that you have out now, and versus maybe the more child-friendly cartoons that are out there. So we can talk about something that's probably very controversial currently right now, and that would be the Joker film. That was a movie that was about the superhero universe, but it was a very violent movie, and that was a focus on mental illness. So there was the focus of that movie was, an answer to what's wrong with society. Somebody search for it, like how can he get better? You look at some of these other films that they have out, you have Batman versus Superman, you have the Avengers films, all these movies come together. Yes, they're very violent, and in a lot of them, violence is kind of the final portrayal in those movies. Those are more, though, tailored to, honestly, at this point, to the adult genre. Most of these superhero movies are coming out PG-13 and rated R now. I mean, you look at Wolverine, that was an incredibly violent movie. But those movies are not really, those movies aren't meant for children. You can have kids that of an age that'll come in and can actually find the enjoyment and see that it's not, I guess, a moral lesson, obviously, in some of these. It's just a movie being a movie.
I think it can definitely bring up the topic of violence. Like if a child will bring up something violent to us, I think you can view, it depends on the person, you can view it as in a negative perspective, saying, oh, it's teaching this child violence. But I think you can also view it as it's an opportunity for you to teach that child how to resolve that, or another way to view that. It really depends on the person.
And that's true. That's these situations are a gateway to life, and it allows a conversation between a child and their guardian to talk a little bit about what, I guess, the purpose of the actions in these movies and shows are. But then if you look at the flip side, you can look at the TV series Supergirl. That show does focus on the violent conflict, but there's always this reinforcement of we don't want to hurt. We never want to kill. That's never the answer. We never really want to hurt. If we can end this situation non-violently, that's always the approach that Supergirl wants to take throughout the whole show. And in the cartoon, you do see a balance of characters that take the aggressive approach versus people who take the pacifist approach. That is kind of the line that I guess is kind of teetering back and forth now. There's more sensationalism in TV shows now. We want something flashy. So what's flashy? Fight scenes. And that's true. A lot of that is being portrayed more and more in our media, especially in the superhero genre, as that's an easy way to focus on it. But to say that the whole entire, I guess, genre of superheroes being entirely focused on violence isn't necessarily true. You have both the violence aspect, which is supposed to be the fun, flashy side of cinematography.
More geared towards adults.
Yeah, towards the adult side. And then you have these more child-friendly programs, and they do focus on, there's always a better way to resolve things. Can we talk this out? Can we bring peace?
Hope.
Exactly. There's hope. There's peace. There's, everybody being considered equal in these shows. That is an approach there, and it really just depends on which piece of media you're looking at that specific time.
Well, and it's good to hear that you guys have that sensitivity for understanding someone who's going through difficult times. In my work as a chaplain, you find out that when someone is sick or when someone's dying, people get nervous and they say the wrong thing, and they cause like emotional pain to people. They'll say, "Oh, everything will be all right," or God has a plan, or something like that, and they have the best intentions, but it actually works the opposite effect. It actually creates more stress. So do you guys talk to each other about what are better ways to encourage people without being using those phrases that everybody uses that are not that helpful? And also, do you have a way to, you said that you support each other and that it is emotionally draining sometimes. Do you have a time that you set up to kind of debrief your experience?
Definitely. I'm actually a social worker, and we definitely talk a lot about self-care and kind of those reflective that I share with the group that are more appropriate when we're in those situations. So even with like a small example of a child just coloring, instead of saying, "That's a pretty picture," a more kind of meaningful reflection is, "I see how hard you're working on that drawing. I see you're working hard." And so when there's someone sick or something difficult, rather than starting a conversation about their specific situation, we can just reflect the feeling and validate the feeling, which is what our group focuses on the most, so that we don't create more harm. It really is validation. Validate that feeling. If that child tells you, "I'm sad," during Harvey, we visited her and the child said, "Oh, I don't get to go to these restaurants anymore. I don't get to go out to eat anymore. That sounds really hard. I see you're really sad about that. That sounds really hard." Rather than trying to make it better because we cannot fix that situation at that time, we try to train our members to just validate the feeling, stay with that child in that moment, rather than trying to solve the problem, because we cannot actually solve the problem. No matter how much we wish we actually could solve those problems, we cannot. And the best thing we can do is just validate and stay with them in that moment. As far as for us to prevent burnout, right after the event, we definitely have discussions about what we just something really difficult. A good example was our very first event at the Texas Children's Hospital. We also saw children in the cancer ward on their way down. We actually weren't supposed to see them, but on their way down the elevator, we saw children from the cancer ward, and that was really, really difficult for us to see, especially that being our first event. And we definitely had and needing to kind of then take some time for ourselves. So every single time after any event we do, we always offer to go out to eat and just debrief with each other, have those difficult conversations, see what we can do to kind of improve our emotional health. So whether that being taking a break, if you need to take a break, that's okay to ask. I would rather one of the members ask me for a break than continue to attend events when they are feeling so drained, because not only is that bad for them and their mental health, but that's not good for the children or the people that we're seeing if they're having a person who is so burnt out going to these events. We also have yearly potlucks. So for Thanksgiving, Christmas, we have one coming up where the group just comes together, and it's not about the children at that point, it's just about us and having some fun, because we definitely need a little bit of that in our lives as well. All of us are full-time working adults, some of us still full-time students, and it can definitely be draining. We are taking time out of our schedules to do this, sometimes even money from our own pockets to do this, so we definitely make sure that we have events throughout the year for just self-care.
Yes, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the camaraderie and that peer-to-peer connection we have in our group. We throw baby showers for our members. We celebrate birthdays, graduations, weddings. We've done donation drives for people specific charities that they have like other affiliations with. It's we do make sure that we always have that group connection. If somebody's having a hard day, somebody's trying to figure something out, the group has offered to help. We've had members that have had issues during Harvey with needing assistance there. The group steps up to help. We never let our heroes work alone, so to speak. And really, another thing I'd like to point out is, like Abby said, she is a social worker, and because of all of her education and all of her work in the field, she's become an amazing tool when it comes to just the validation, working with children. How do you approach a population that's already in need, that's already facing something that's, keeping them down, that's impacting their lives in a negative fashion, and it's there day in and day out. They see it. And it's like Abby said, you don't want to make that worse. Thankfully with her, though, it's where we know we're going into a situation, homeless children we're dealing with, sick children, an autistic population. Abby has been really great at giving the group keynotes like, hey, we should approach situations this way. We should never state something so obvious in terms of a child's illness. We never bring that up. Everything that child,
unless they bring it up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any topic that we have, any conversation we have with that kid starts with what that kid wants to talk about. If that kid wants to talk all day about a dinosaur watch that he has, well, guess what? That is what we're talking about right there, right? If that child wants to ride on Spider-Man's back for an entire event and talk about how her and her family have been in a shelter and how she really is happy that she has her brother and her mom and dad there, but she does want to go back home, then guess what? That's what we sit there and we talk about with this child. That's what they want to approach, but it always comes from the child first, and we always, once again, as Abby stated, we validate those feelings.
I think it's also important to remember what our role is as volunteers. We are not their doctor. We are not their therapist. The best thing that we can do is just validate and stay with that child.
Exactly, and it's this is going to be kind of, I guess, almost preachy when we say this, but this is something that we really wish we could get the population around us to understand. We want Houston, we want Texas, we want the world to understand that we're not just dressed up as heroes, dancing around, making kids smile and being goofy. There are moments where a child steps away from something that's really hard for them to comprehend and deal with, and they can kind of shed that a little bit by talking to a superhero about it. And that is really why we're here. That is the one thing that we want to do day in and day out as Cosplay for Kids is, what do you want to talk about? What's on your mind? What will make you happy? What will, make this day a little bit better for you? And that's what we're here for. I think some people may not see that right away, but once they see the photos of the sick kids or, the children, and they see how happy they really are being made, I think people are going to start to understand that.
Our show goes out to people in the Nashville area, and then on the podcast, there's people all over the world that listen to it. So for those that are not familiar with the different tropical storms and hurricanes that we've dealt with here in Houston, Harvey was one of the ones that most recent that affected a lot of people, whether they lost their homes or they had to deal with water entering their homes. And then we had one as recent as Imelda that I'm seeing patients that have been affected by it. So if someone wants to be involved in your group, how do they go about to participate and become part of it?
Okay, so we have a Facebook page, and that is our primary, our primary window into our world and our communication. We can be contacted via Facebook at Cosplay for Kids Houston, or Cosplay for Kids, and then
we also have a email account. It's cosplayforkidshouston@gmail.com. Typically, the email is for anyone who's interested in hosting us. So we have an intake form that we will send them, and that's kind of how we get the ball rolling for the.
For new members, though, you can contact us through either media, and then usually one of the group officials will reply and say, okay, we see that this is what you want to do. Let's set up a time to meet, and that's really our first step in getting heroes or our new heroes into the group. We do a face-to-face interview with possible attendee. This kind of helps us weed out those who are willing to put the time and effort in and who are considered reliable, because if you're not willing to make it to the very first interview and talk face-to-face for anywhere between 20 to 45 minutes at most, then we know that you also won't be reliable to come to event Saturday mornings at 7 a.m. for a few hours. So after you have the initial contact, we do our face-to-face interview. Then we move into looking at references that the new members would be giving us. These all need to be professional or so professors, supervisors, and managers, things of that nature. Just some people that we can talk to and kind of get a good idea of what your character is. Once we get those references out of the way and we talk to a few of them, we move into what we would call a shadow event, where the new member would join us in our more recent event, and would be kind of working alongside a specific hero. You'll be partnered up with one, and you will spend that event working alongside that hero, and you'll be monitored by not only just the hero you're sided with, but for all the ones that are around. Everybody's going to be kind of taking a look over at you, making sure everything's all right. We understand that these events can be stressful for first-timers, but once you get that first event out of the way, it can become second nature. But, eyes are on you for your sake and the child's sake in that situation. And honestly, at the end of the event, if we see that you did well working with the children, you did well working with the families and the other workers there at that event, because that's another big thing that people probably don't think about is the communication skills and interaction you have with the actual charity event organizers and workers. If you can't get along with them too, well, that's going to cause some friction down the road. But once that's all said and done, that's usually our good tell whether or not we'd like to have that person officially on as a member. Abby?
For anyone who just wants to follow us and just kind of see the work that we do always post after every event, mainly through Facebook. Like Justin said, Cosplay for Kids Texas. We also have an Instagram, Cosplay for Kids Houston. And that's mainly where we post kind of what we've been up to, the different organizations that we're seeing, the different things that we're doing for people who just want to kind of tag along with us on this journey.
It's a good first look into the group before you decide to try to even go through the interview. You can look through and see the populations that we've reached. You can see the events that we go to, the conditions that we're in, because it is Houston, so it does get pretty hot. And if you're in a costume, it can be a little bit trying. But being a part of the group that way by taking a look into the social media and kind of seeing what goes on with us is an amazing first step for anybody involved, because I'll let you know pretty much everything you need to know about what you will be doing as a hero. Now, we do have other positions for people who just want to do photography, or if they would just like to do preparatory work on the crafts and stuff. That is a bit different. Really, that's just going to be talking to, making sure script writing as well. Exactly. They follow some of those same prior standards. Just you obviously wouldn't be going to a shadow. But we're also always looking for people who can help us with the crafts and the skits, photography, social media management as well. There's other spots that are always available. So, yeah, I would say just to anybody out there that's curious about joining us, give us a shout out on Facebook or drop us an email at our Cosplay for Kids Houston@gmail.com.
And can you tell us more about your costume policy? Like I said, sometimes it can be very pricey to get like the professional movie looking costume. So what do you do once people would like to participate but they have limited resources?
So what we've done in the past is, depending on the availability of our grant funds, we will purchase those costumes for our heroes once they have passed through all of the stages of approval. Other times they buy it themselves, and we don't require for it to be kind of superhero novelty. Greg is one of the really awesome, committed members who chose. It was definitely not required for him to buy a quality of costume, because also I do let members keep in mind that we are working with children, and if anybody who's worked with children, they know that they'll tug, spit, cry, snot,
cover you in marker.
Your costume may and probably will get damaged at one point, so it's definitely not required for it to be extremely expensive. We do want it to look nice, however, not,
no frayed edges. We want it to be a clean costume.
Yes.
And on top of that, it's like I said, if we have funding, we're willing to assist, purchase some costumes. We do have a small stock of costumes that we have stored for future members as well. A lot of our members have brought their own costumes with them. They have either already started cosplaying as that character,
or
they
want
already
to keep those costumes, because any costume we buy is property of Cosplay for Kids, and will be kind of circled around through heroes that are available for that specific event. So a lot of heroes may want to keep their own costume, and so therefore they will buy their own costume. Another policy would be for it to just be appropriate, both culturally and not too revealing. Not too revealing. Yeah, it really depends on the organization that we're going to attend to, but typically any hospital shelter will ask that we have a very, not revealing, tights under your skirt, things like that, and we'll usually have them at least a picture of their costume before we approve it for the event.
And we also try to be sure that tattoos are covered up by costume. So if you have a costume that has like a short sleeve and you happen to have a sleeve tattoo, much like I do, I wear a full body Spider-Man costume. So it doesn't matter. I can be tattooed from head to toe and nobody's gonna ever know it until I take the suit off. But we do ask that tattoos be covered, and just like I said, yeah, it's a respectful thing. We aren't revealing, and we cover tattoos, and that's our general guidelines in terms of what would be considered a safe costume. And just like I said, as long as it's a clean costume, doesn't have to be this S-tier costume. Obviously, if you're willing to risk the money and the costume involved if a child does damage it, because at that point you can't blame the child for being a kid and being excited, obviously.
And if you care, this group is not for you.
Yeah, exactly. If that's your favorite, then we're not the group for you. But yeah, if you wish to take the opportunity to get a nice costume and wear it, then by all means, we're not going to stop you. And we love to see those really nice costumes. Obviously, they look amazing. And but I mean, at the end of the day, too, a child will see a $20 Superman costume, and then can see like $300 Superman costume, and all that child is going to really see two Supermans. There you go. So you're better off probably buying the cheaper ones to start getting used to it, and then if you feel like taking that opportunity, you can buy the more expensive ones.
Well, and the reason that I'm happy that you guys have a vetting process for your members is because in October last month, it came up that there was an incident at the Universal Orlando Resort where a guy dressed up as Gru from Despicable Me was making alt-right and white supremacist signs while taking pictures with an African-American family. So you never know. Like, I always wonder when you go to Disney World, you have these people dressed up as characters. Like, you don't know who's under there. You don't know if they have the right intentions. So what do you guys think about what happened in that situation?
Well, so it's kind of like you bring up it being a Disney World, Disneyland, or a affiliated company. It's a very large one, so it's hard to kind of manage every single person you're going to have in character. So luckily for us, we don't have to worry about that as much because we actually can devote the time and effort into making sure we do have a well-suited person for these roles. Now, to get to the incident, you're basically really that hurts that community that hurts the power that these characters that we portray have. For somebody to throw a symbol of white supremacy, to throw anything that a hateful symbol, as simple as it was, it had its impact. It did what it needed to do, and that's something that can't be changed. Those characters no longer have as strong of a power to do good as it did originally, and I think that's really the biggest takeaway on that is these characters are meant to be fun. They're meant to represent happiness, hope, good fortune. And when you use that pedestal of being Gru from Despicable Me to perform an act like that, it can really, it takes away the power that those characters have. I keep kind of saying this over and over again, but if a child sees a character doing that, then they see it as normal. And you have one side that says, oh, I'm doing that because that's okay. And the other side says, oh, it's normal for people that look like me to be treated this way.
I do think the administration does have some responsibility with that as well, because they are in charge of these individuals that they are hiring. And I think that anyone, whether a big company like Universal Studios or Disney, or a small organization local to Houston like us, we have when we're working with children or any vulnerable population, we are taking this responsibility to look after these children, to care for these children. And so we have to make sure that we are allowing the very best individuals to interact with children. So I do think that they also have kind of a little bit of blame on their shoulders for kind of allowing that to happen. I hope, I'm not too familiar with this case, but I do hope that they took the necessary precautions and are maybe a little bit more strict on their interviews, because they're working with children. They are characters that are towards children. And
in the previous question, we talked about resolving conflict without violence and things like that. One thing that happened to me, I was a big Batman fan as a kid, and I watched the animated series and things like that, and there was always a line that Batman never crossed. Like, he would rough someone up or threaten them or whatever, but he had suffered from violence by his parents being killed with a gun, so he didn't use weapons. And then as an adult, I'm watching the Daredevil show, and I really wanted to like it. I really liked the characters. I thought it was really well done. But he would just like throw people off of buildings and like torture them. And I'm like, what happened? Like, there was no ethical line for Daredevil, and I thought he was very similar to Batman, and he had a disability, and he was able to thrive as a superhero. So I was very disappointed. And going back to what you were saying about they're trying to be edgy or they're trying to be action-packed, but it seems like maybe the writers and the producers are not thinking about how what they're portraying is actually like influencing people. And I don't know how you guys feel about, like you've said, if the superheroes are symbols of goodness, of people who are fighting for righteous causes, and it's easy to for kids to want to be like them. So do you think that there's a responsibility for the writers and the creators of these movies to think about that a lot of people complain about Superman being too much of a Boy Scout, and it's like, well, that's what people need. They need someone that has ethical guidelines and has a good sense of right and wrong, and that now all the lines are being blurred, and that's maybe affecting the way that children see right and wrong?
No, I definitely agree. I think with this time and age, it's just for views, for popularity, that they're just trying to cram as much action as they possibly can into these shows, and they're forgetting the point, the purpose of those heroes, and just really focusing on the graphic things that will get them the views. And I think it really should be different. I understand that there should be action. I mean, there's superheroes, definitely some action scenes in there, but I think it definitely has strayed to more violence and aggression.
I feel that with these new shows that we're seeing, these new movies, obviously we see that these superhero films are coming out R-rated even now. Some of them were, like Deadpool, were kind of built to already be a more adult-friendly character, but it's like we take a step back to Daredevil, and we talk about how they say Superman is such a Boy Scout, evolution that I think kind of characters that is caused by an aging society, aging fandom. The people who grew up reading comic books, even, in the 70s, they're older now. They should be able to withstand a certain amount of, violence and not see it as the right things, and they see it as a shock factor. But that's the issue, is you grow up loving a character, just like you're saying, like you knew Batman never crossed that line. He felt that pain, and he would never give that pain, but he would stop it. Superman, a Boy Scout, yes, the strongest person, arguably in that universe. It's one of the big ones ever, right? He has all of that power, but he never abuses it. He uses it, instead of abusing it, he uses it strictly to bring about peace. It takes a very, very strong individual mentally to have an infinite amount of power and only use it to better those around them, versus a supervillain who would only use it for self-gain. There is that fine line. I feel like it is crossed in a lot of media now, and it is something that I think that should be kind of focused on. I think that there's more to gain from the superhero media if the approach isn't finalized with violence. There is the need to defend those that are in trouble. They're being attacked by superheroes, by alien creatures from outer space. Yes, that's great. Everybody loves to see that. But at the end, those conflicts are usually, in the comic books, they look to be resolved in some other way other than, violence, like true violence. We know that in the past there has been, obviously, comic books have been violent in the past, but it seems like there's more of a focus on it now because of just this.
But especially if it's geared towards children,
mm-hmm.
then I think it definitely should include some type of resolution, something that inevitably
mm-hmm.
teaching these children, whether
mm-hmm.
you were intending to or not teaching these children
mm-hmm.
a lesson through these movies and TV shows.
And I think a lot is lost in the character whenever you go from having the person that did have that moral view. They never would kill. They never would hurt somebody so greatly. And now you have people that is completely changed. Everybody's turning into the Punisher at this point.
Well, and I would love to have you guys back on the show to talk more about these things because when Iron Man 3 came out, and just to let my audience know, I'm applying to be the Iron Man in this group, and I hope that they accept me, and I hope that they think I play a good version of him. But when I watched Iron Man 3, my friend told me, that movie's going to stink because they're showing Iron Man as being emotional, that he's like in touch with his feelings. And then I watched the movie, and he had gone through a traumatic experience when he went up into space and fell down, and he was fighting the aliens in the first Avenger movie. And somehow, in some groups of people, and I have a whole spiel about how there's these fans who are very hateful, and they want everything to be their way. They were saying that he was being feminized or made a wimp because he was dealing with trauma. And having worked with people with PTSD and the military, for people to be that ignorant to say that if someone who's gone through trauma and is dealing with their emotions is weak is ridiculous and obnoxious. And they actually try to portray that in the movie. And I thought they did a fairly good job with it. So he's a vulnerable superhero who can deal with difficult things in a human way. That's fantastic to actually have that arc within a story, and for them to humanize a hero. That's fantastic. But somehow there are some people that don't want to see that. They want people to keep fighting and not care. And that's what leads a lot to the shaming of people who have experienced trauma, and then they find destructive ways to deal with it instead of healthy ways like we would recommend. So we can get into that in a later time, but there's just, I think within the fan base, we need to be pushing for positive role models and positive ways to deal with not only conflict, but trauma and difficult experiences and things like that. You guys have anything to say about that as we close?
No, I just say that it's
agreed.
Yeah, it's agreed.
And definitely showing emotion should not be seen as weak, or if you think something is feminine, why is that a bad thing? Showing emotion is a human experience. We all have it, and if that makes someone uncomfortable, then maybe that person should take a look at why that's making them uncomfortable. I think that movie, I recall exactly what you're talking about, and I think they did a really great job in showing his emotions, and I think that's yet another way for children or just people to see kind of themselves in the hero that they idolize and see, it can happen to anyone. Even a hero can have some emotional trauma, and they can also get through with it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's just a good way to present that you can be strong. You can have all of this ability. You can be Tony Stark with a suit of metal that can do anything you ask it to. Yeah, but at the end of the day, if you're hurt, you're hurt. That's something that's inside and something that you do need to work through.
Doesn't make you any less of a hero.
Not at all. Not at all.
Thank you. Yeah, we've done a few things about superheroes in the last couple of weeks, so maybe that's our new focus. We talk about every subject under the sun for all these years, and people tell me that we're too broad. So maybe we need to focus on something specific, and I know that there's an interest on this topic, and there could be something unique that we're doing. Okay, well, a pleasure meeting you. Hope to see you in person soon. And
thank you so much for having us.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's always great to meet new people who have great ideas and who are actually doing something positive and affirming in the community. And we would like to thank you for your work. Thank you for going out of your way to support people in need. there's so many people suffering in this world, and we always need heroes who either in a creative, artistic way or just in a human way are able to express that amount of hope and desire to be together. I think that the thing that the children or people who are struggling enjoy the most is having people care, and just to make the effort to show up and be there to cheer them up. That is that means a lot to them. So thank you for your good work. Thank you for being on the show, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the Mystic and the Skeptic. 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 Mystic and the Skeptic.